Alright, I'm gonna go clarify the experience that I just had because I am really fucking tired with the passive aggressive bullshit. Alright? Ultimately, there are times in life where we're wrong, and ultimately, you may not like you're wrong, but you're wrong. And when people let you know you're wrong, it's to give you a chance to go ahead and try to correct. Alright? Not to go ahead and try to make it worse. Alright? So, let's go ahead and talk about attempting to promote a flimsy case while simultaneously trying to do what you can to avoid from anyone getting caught in the fallout of anyone else's bullshit. All right? So, I was asked to go ahead and sign a certified, USPS notification for the divorce papers, which, by the way, ultimately, I want to let you know when it comes to contract law, going ahead and enticing and coercing somebody into a fraudulent and unconscionable contract, you know, uh, ultimately, that right there is considered fraud, forgery, and perjury. So the submission of those statements into any federal or state body ultimately would end up going ahead and being an admission of perjury. So think before you jump. All right? But now with the factor that the news in Florida ended up going ahead and covering the story that I had been piecing together for well over a decade. All right? I ended up getting a letter from the bank. All right? Now, ultimately, you know how when you're right, there are signs? I'm not going to show who the teller is, but when it comes to blocking access for me to be able to find out and see, my personal circumstance rather than having to take my family's word for it, while I actively watched them try to pick my pocket right in front of my face, came in the form of a letter. All right? I'm not giving the name. If you couldn't tell, I'm not giving a name. Hi, Matthew. Thank you for your trust in Piedmont Advantage Credit Union. I have enclosed my card should you have any questions. We appreciate your membership and welcome to the credit union family. Simply service. Just offering the service that legally supposed to provide. All right? Now, go ahead, keep in mind, going and trying to withhold the divorce papers, and trying to torture and trying to set up a perjury trap type situation, which, keep in mind, I had to be very transparent. That right there, that could be viewed as coercion, which would be considered unconscionable, which would be, basically go ahead and undercut you, considering the fact that you'd have to go ahead and testify under oath at that point. Not to mention that. But, it ended up saying divorce papers. So if those divorce papers are really a coerced confession or an attempted plea bargain to try to get me to take accountability or responsibility for whatever the fuck anyone thought that was a good idea, decided to do behind my back. Because I'm not falling for it. Alright? Not to mention that, keep in mind too, when it comes to the Federal Debt Collection Act, ultimately, I'm not waiving over any rights. Alright? As far as can you just sign this paper waiving over the rights to discovery and exploration and everything? But, she said, sign it first. When I asked what it was, she said, sign it first. Then flipped it over and showed that it was the divorce papers. Trying to be like, haha, fuck you, you got served. And the funny thing is, in that circumstance, I ended up saying to her, I'm like, all right, so now that you're not holding the divorce papers hostage anymore, are you going to finally get the situation addressed with my license? you know? She's like, fuck you, you're an adult. You need to figure it out yourself. That's your problem. I got my own life. I was like, you know, then asked, why should I? So my response was, well, considering the factor that, you know, you ended up having to deal with a whole court situation with Jimmy, ultimately got a whole bunch of people submitting depositions and witness statements, ultimately factor that you're trying to go ahead and have that hose, that sink, and that fireplace, you know, trying to get those counted as rooms, you know, to be able to justify your clearly not up to zoning, you know, and tenant standards. So, you know, because ultimately, if we end up having to go bring the situation to court, I don't want to end up saying anything because a whole bunch of your business that I didn't want to get involved in. Well, meantime, you're getting into my business a lot. Not to mention that, but ultimately, when it comes down to trying to mince words between tenant and, you know, landlord and, family relationship and all that, understand something. Ultimately, as a tenant, if you are wanting to go ahead and collect, you know, rent, ultimately, there are certain things that you need to go ahead and respect. Like, for example, there are certain boundaries as far as upstairs and downstairs, since you wanted all that division, while simultaneously do not want to go ahead and show the factor of the numbers, of the details of the bills, as well as, you know, want to keep going ahead and trying to stall tactic and try to distract every time you go out with, you know, a card that has access to my bank account, so you could try to rob me again and then try to blame the government because fuck you. So, I mean, ultimately, I don't think you want to go ahead and bring that to the stand, because if I end up saying something that ends up revealing perjury in a statement that you ended up going ahead and using to try to avoid a housing discrimination lawsuit, I can't help you. And ultimately, you trying to go ahead and prevent me from being able to get the situation with my license fixed and the insurance, all that. Ultimately, what you're doing, if anyone puts you up to this, all right, you are gullible. They are literally using you in an attempt to witness tamper. All right. Now that you know that you're doing it, you need to go ahead and stop doing it. All right. I've literally got my case built. I could go ahead and argue it. I could literally go ahead and take multiple different organizations at the same time. We're talking just a full-on strike. And ultimately, you want to go ahead and act as the gatekeeper. The story that I had been working on for well over a decade just appeared on the news in Florida. So while you think that my time is worthless, 10 years worth of my investigatory skill literally just ended up on fucking national news. Well, you could give a shit less. So understand what I am trying to tell you. All right? With you wanting to be nosy, being a busybody, and trying to do what you can to insert your opinion and try to force your rule. All right? You could even right now be, you know, for example, swaying a jury, tainting a jury, like witness tampering. You know, you could potentially end up getting hit with an obstruction charge. And ultimately, if you think that the winning strategy that you got is walk into court, be like, prove all the accusations that you said and horrible things about me. My response is, Your Honor, they're literally sealed files, and this, you know, case was sealed with prejudice well over a decade ago. Ultimately, it ends up having details that would only be accessible if the court hadn't gone and sealed it, which ultimately would have ended up leaving it open to a Freedom of Information Act. All right, considering the factor that at the time I was a juvenile and my mother is trying to go ahead and use circumstances that ended up leading to me being ordered into a group home, while simultaneously not wanting to clarify the difference between the family law aspect and the criminal law aspect, you know, while going ahead and breaching my constitutional right and breaching double jeopardy. Ultimately, if you go ahead and you open up that file, you're going to go ahead and expose not only a whole bunch of judicial and prosecutorial misconduct, as well as evidence tampering, witness tampering, tortious interference with contract, dereliction of fiduciary duty, intentional infliction of emotional distress, Fair Standard Labor Act, you know, breaches, Consumer Financial Protection Act breaches, and, you know, fraudulent statements, perjury. Are you understanding that I'm saying drop it before you blow us all the fuck up?